everybody loves the topic of beer. I wish we could, like we do at Discovery World sometimes, actually have beer for everybody to enjoy, but can't be checking IDs, unfortunately, university though. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be back here, kind of in a professional sense, talking about something that's very near and dear. As Professor Arnold mentioned, it was actually because of Bettina's interest in homebrewing, herself and her husband, that kind of sparked my interest, and a colleague, Ricky Kubicek, who's also now a recent graduate, to start brewing while we were in grad school, and kind of built from there as far as how then to apply it archaeologically. And it was word got out when I was working down at Discovery World that I had homebrewed, and they wanted to see how, like, maybe you should just, do a lecture series. So I started that, and now it's really becoming a kind of a full-fledged kind of career. I feel like I'm researching and brewing more than I'm actually doing excavation work, but hopefully that'll change soon. What I have here, I'm going to kind of speak to what we're doing as far as some of the experimental stuff. We're going to do a batch of, this is fine. I think I should be able to do this. You should see what I basically was looking to get heat out of this. If I had my way, it would be a fire here, but that'd probably be a code violation. As far as what beer is, many of you probably already know. I'm just going to go through some of the main ingredients, and this is typically what beer is in the modern day, just to give you some indication. But beer obviously is almost completely water. That's a major component. And of course, pH within the water is going to change flavor. But of course, grains are the majority of what gives you the flavor in the context of alcohol subsequently. And that is because when grain is, especially barley, some of these other grains we see that all can be ultimately fermented, it's the sugars in that, once it reaches a certain point, that yeast then added to that, which is again another component, will break that sugar down and convert it into alcohol. I won't go into the chemistry of it, but very early on, that was sort of figured out. They didn't really know it was the yeast that was the culprit of the production of the alcohol as a result of that, but it was really actually it was Louis Pasteur who kind of figured that out, and that was very recent. Medieval monks called yeast, or what they thought was yeast, kind of a loose translation anyway. It was God is good. So obviously they knew that there was something very sacred about that, and they were some of the first to really and augment the process. So of course hops is another variety that was added only within the last millennium, coming from North Europe. So what we're going to look at is the Sumerian type of Sikaru. This is actually based off of, we'll see the tablet that it's kind of transcribed from. And it's about 4,000 years old. And basically what it is bop here is the translation for bread. And so what I've done in this ceramic vessel here is actually, I've already made the bop here. And that's kind of, as you see some of the ingredients in there, it's basically grain. Now it depends on this, as far as quantity of grains, portions obviously varies based on how much you brew. This is a very small batch, in the 2-gallon volume. So what I have in here is also a regular 6-row barley, and that's in here. That comes 6-row barley, as we'll see, typically was used in lowland Mesopotamia because there's 2-row barley and 6-row barley. I'll get into some of those varieties, but based on archaeological examples and archaeobotanicals, so those who study the seeds that are left behind, 6-row barley seems to be found more often in the lowland context. So this is sort of where Mesopotamia sprung from, particularly was in the Euphrates and the Tigris River, modern Iraq. So that's lowland Delta region. So that's why I'm using the 6-row. And then there's some honey in there, which is quite prevalent throughout antiquity, and dates. And dates are actually one of the things they think may have been used to ferment. Just like when you make wine, there's natural yeast within the skins that ultimately ferments wine. So like that, likewise, the dates have been used very early on to actually produce the alcohol. So, the origins. There's quite a few slides here. I don't know, I think I can get through them all in the time we have, but we're going to skip around a bit, start in Mesopotamia, and then move our way through the Old World, and then come to the New World and see some sites that have been recently excavated that have brewing context to them. It's very, very difficult to say what, when and who was the first to actually come across this strain through. But likely what happened is, what you need is, when you thresh or harvest grain, we'll say barley in this case, what needs to happen before it can actually be ready for brewing is that it needs to be malted. Malting is to the point where it soaks for a little bit, and then it starts to grow like a sprout. That actually was happening inside the germination process. It's converting starches internally to sugars that are fermentable. So what happens then, likely what happened is that sometime there was grain that was likely wild, barley or einkorn, emmer, some of these other wild wheats that were growing in this region, used for harvesting, likely for food consumption. You can't say that they already had it figured out that it was they were going to make excess of this for beer. So likely what happened is that it was used for food, but or gruel or porridge. And what happened, resulted likely, is that spontaneous fermentation. And whoever enjoyed that first unexpected drink, kind of realized, oh, hey, this is pretty good. It's actually giving me quite a nice little buzz. It likely it wasn't very alcoholic, probably 1 to 3%. Some of the experiments actually show that this is, to get a high alcohol level, you need a lot more grain. Likely this was kind of a more weak variety, kind of very opaque. Would have been husks in there too, but regardless, that was kind of what is known as this step-by-step process that would happen to produce that first beer. And it was likely independent, it wasn't necessarily one place at one time. As we'll see, this site, in fact, in China, and that actually holds the oldest record. Everybody's looking for the oldest evidence of alcohol, but it was actually in China, in Jiahu, which is right here in Henan province. And so this is Dr. Patrick McGovern. Now, some of you already know his name. He's very involved. He's at the University of Pennsylvania, an archaeometrist. Somebody who studies chemistry within archaeology. And he has a particular interest in alcohol production as well, and its effect on civilization. And so in this site, within some of these Neolithic jars that were found with this, I believe she was in her 20s, female, they found residue, and so from that residue now was able to extract some of the ingredients that went into this particular alcoholic beverage. In this case, you can see it was actually rice was the primary fermentable, because that was domesticated very early on over there too. Honey, hawthorn, and wild grapes. So dogfish head, I'll talk a few slides, you'll see that these guys are actually out of Delaware, Milton, Delaware. Have been working with Patrick McGovern to produce a lot of ancient beers. This was one of them, so they came up with Jiahu beer. It's quite good, you can still find it. There's some other examples then that you'll see that they actually try to replicate as well. So I'm very impressed that they're kind of trying to break the envelope as far as what beer tastes like it should be, and kind of paying homage to the past. So yes, China holds the record for the earliest alcoholic beverage. But as far as what we're going to really talk about is kind of the ancient Near East, the Fertile Crescent. This is again obviously modern Iraq down here into parts of Iran, up into Syria, and parts of Turkey. Now it seems like based on some of these archaeological sites, these are very early days for wild grain being found in some of the sites in Israel. This is actually just within the last couple of years, a sickle was found in this actually cache here that's quite old, 14,000 years, 2 feet in size. So that was used for actually harvesting grain. Genetically, DNA evidence suggests that lower kind of south, I guess that southeast Turkey is some of the earliest actually kind of the origin areas for some of these domesticated grain coming out of that and then like moving down into the valleys of Mesopotamia. So that's grain. I mean, barley being the predominant grain, at least further down the road. There's a lot more evidence archaeologically about barley. So Ordium vulgare. And basically, again, I mentioned there's 2-row and 6-row barley, and that's just really based on the spikelets. They're almost genetically identical, just morphologically slightly different. So archaeobotanics